For some reason, PowerPoint's decided it doesn't like me anymore, and it keeps crashing on me with today's presentation. Any attempt at editing anything will instantly crash PowerPoint, and just scrolling through 3 or 4 slides will eventually cause it to freeze up and stop displaying. And unfortunately, I didn't have this problem yesterday, and I didn't find out about it early enough today that I was able to either troubleshoot the problem or move to a different computer. So instead, I'm using a presentation that's a few months old. It's missing some of the slides of some of the newer products that we've gotten, so I apologize. When I remember, I'll try to just talk about them without a slide there. And we may skip over some of the slides because I think some of the slides here are either out of date or just really aren't for today's presentation. But cross our fingers, I think I'll be able to get through this presentation without it crashing on me. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And just a reminder, we're recording this to the cloud, and on my computer, anytime we're recording to the cloud, slide animations or just the transition from one slide to another can sometimes stall. So if there's some uncomfortable silences, it's just because I'm waiting for the slide to advance. Such as now. Okay, so just to start off with a little background about who Zyxel is, if you're not familiar with us, and if you're joining today's webinar, you probably aren't that familiar with us. So some quick background, we've been making networking equipment for 30 years now. We were founded all the way back in 1989. Got started in the analog modem space, specifically analog modems used by, in those days, dial-up bulletin board systems and then dial-up internet service providers, and branched out from there. These days, we are selling our products in 150 different global markets, and we have over 100 million devices deployed out in the field. Here in the United States, some of our big partners are CenturyLink. Up in Canada, I believe we're doing stuff with several of the ISPs up there. God, my mind's going blank. Some of the guys here in North America. I apologize. I'm still flustered about my PowerPoint slide not working. But a lot of the major service providers use our equipment, either as CPE or COE equipment. Anyway, a little bit more about Zyxel. We are not a brander. We are not relying on third-party ODMs or the chipset vendors to provide all the product and code for us. We have our own hardware R&D and our own internal in-house R&D. So engineer-wise, combination of software and hardware engineers, we have a little over 500 engineers out there. Our tech support teams, a little over 150 people globally. Our main headquarters is based out of Taiwan, but we've also got R&D facilities here in North America and in Germany for select products. Now, when you look at the products that we're offering here in North America, we tend to break them up into 3 different categories. Our products aimed at that telco and service provider market, business products, and some of our home products. So today's presentation is focusing on that middle section there, the products that are aimed at the business. Most of these product lines have been around as long as I've been at Zyxel. I've been here a little over 15 years. And even back then, we had business class switches, security firewall appliances for business, and business Wi-Fi. So we've been doing this for a while. So when we take a look and break down what we sell into the business space, we've got our security appliances, so firewalls, unified threat management devices, switches, our wireless LANs. We've also in North America have a series of gateways specifically aimed at the hospitality space for small to medium-sized hotels. And then we've got a number of different network management solutions, from cloud-based solutions to local software-based solutions, free and not so free. A lot of different things there. So we'll start off here by talking a little bit about security. So our security products, we've got a number of different series here. We've got our NSG series. These are part of our Nebula solution, which we'll talk about way later. And if you're interested in Nebula and cloud management, we have dedicated monthly Nebula webinars where we just talk about Nebula. So if you don't get the email inviting you to that, reach out to your salesperson if you're interested, and we can do that for you. We have the VPN series firewall appliances. These ones do not provide UTM services, but they're optimized for fast VPN throughput. So lots of VPN connections, good performance through there. Our standard Zyxel series, so these are our traditional firewall appliances. And these do not include generally any UTM services, but they can, most of the models you can add UTM services, or at least some of the UTM services through them to the license. And then we've got the USG series. These normally come with a full 1-year bundle of all the UTM features out of the box. Waiting for the next slide. There we go. So when it comes to providing VPN services, we have a hybrid VPN solution. So we support SSL VPN, IPsec VPN, and L2TP over IPsec VPN. So your SSL VPN is what your traditional road warrior is probably going to use from their laptop, so you don't have to install and configure a client. They simply log into a URL that you provide them. It downloads and runs a little widget that makes the SSL VPN connection for you. Uses standard SSL networking to do that. IPsec VPN is what you traditionally are going to use to connect multiple offices together. And then L2TP over IPsec is what you would use for your mobile users, connecting with a mobile phone or tablet or something like that back to the network. So we can provide all three of those simultaneously. So when looking at our Zyxel series, these are some of the features that we offer. Category-based content filtering, so you can set up your firewall rules to block websites based on the type of content. So we've got lots of different things in there, from job searches to pornography, so you can block those. Doesn't matter if their websites are encrypted or not, we will block it. We have the ability to do multiple WANs, do load balancing across those WANs for you. We've got our easy mode, which provides sort of a wizard that walks you through the process of configuring some of the more common settings or things you need to configure when you're first setting up a firewall. We've got this really cool application intelligence, where basically we allow you to create firewall rules based on individual applications. So we've got a bunch of different web applications all categorized. You just go down to a pull-down menu, choose what the application is, and oftentimes you can choose individual functionality in that application, and then you can create your firewall rule to block or allow or to provide QoS. So, for instance, you can, choose to block Facebook Messenger, or you can choose to allow Facebook Messenger but block video chatting or block file transfers. So we've got over 3,000 different applications and behaviors that you can set up without needing to worry about things like, the protocol being used, the ports being used, the traditional things you normally need to plug in on a firewall rule. Almost all of our firewall appliances now include an integrated wireless LAN controller. So you don't need to buy a separate wireless LAN controller. So as long as you're buying our 5000 series or higher access points, those can all be managed by the same box as providing your firewall and UTM services. Other stuff we've got here is high availability. Depending on the box, it's either standard high availability. So if one device goes down, a second one takes over. On our higher end devices, we have high availability Pro, which gets things set up in an active passive mode with a dedicated heartbeat between the two units, keeping them in sync. So if one unit goes down, when the second one takes over, it keeps all your sessions active and things like that. So there's no interruption at all. We have the ability to do link aggregation groups. We also have the ability through a license to add the ability to do most of the same hotspot functionality that's normally found in our dedicated hotspot appliances. So if you're looking to provide advanced guest access, whether it's visitors to your office or whether you're looking to do a small hotel, you can use a single box solution. So it's providing firewall, it's providing UTM, it's providing wireless LAN management, and now also can be providing hotspot functionality. So one of the biggest questions we get asked is, why should we sell the Zyxel product? Why instead of a Sonic Wall or WatchGuard or Fortinet? We could probably spend all day going through some of the reasons, but the biggest one probably for you here is when we look at the total cost of ownership over 3 years. When you compare us, both the hardware and the license and support costs, some pretty significant savings against our competition. Some of that is a little bit lower price on the hardware, a little bit lower price on the licenses, but also because Zyxel provides phone support for free, firmware updates for free, so you don't have to be buying on top of the hardware and on top of your UTM licenses. You don't have to be buying a support plan with us to be able to get that support. We provide access here to our tech support team. They're based out of our Anaheim office here. They're not outsourced, so you can call in and talk to somebody here at Zyxel if you have any issues or if you need some help figuring out how to configure or set something up. The other thing I want to point to here is when it comes to managing licenses, set yourself up at our My Zyxel portal as a reseller, and then all of your customers will show up under your reseller account, and you'll be able to see in real time the status of any licenses for all of your customers and be able to quickly and easily be able to upgrade those licenses or renew those licenses through that same portal. So one simple place to go to see what's going on with all your customers. Another thing we're doing a little bit differently than some of our competition in the UTM space is most of our competition tries to provide this UTM functionality themselves in-house. So in addition to designing the hardware, writing the software, they're also trying to make themselves be antivirus experts, content filtering experts, et cetera, et cetera. So what we do differently is we've gone out there and we've partnered with some of the best brands when it comes to these services and use their signatures and their experience to keep on top of things. So for antivirus, we're using Bitdefender. For anti-spam and for content filtering, we've partnered with Siren. For intrusion detection and prevention, and for our application intelligence, we work with Trend Micro. They're the ones providing that back end for us. So another functionality that seems to be kind of hot these days is Amazon Web Services. So we have the ability to create a virtual private cloud. So basically, it allows you to host your cloud-based software in your own private cloud at Amazon, and then create a secure link between the local office or your remote user and that public cloud. So even though it's hosted on AWS, it's essentially the same thing as if it was being hosted in your own data center or hosted on site for the customer. So this is something we provide. We are on Amazon's list of officially supported appliances for creating this level of functionality here on our Zyxel series. So you can see if you log into your VPC dashboard at Amazon, you can choose us, choose the platform, and you can actually download the configuration you need to get this all set up and working. It makes it super simple to set up for you. And then we've got another new product line. It's ATP, Advanced Threat Protection. So I don't think I've got a slide on this, but one of the big benefits of the ATP firewall is it's offloading a lot of the UTM functionality into the cloud. So the firewall itself runs a lot faster. So if you're one of those people, you've got customers that have ridiculously fast WAN internet speeds and other firewall appliances just aren't fast enough, at least not in a reasonable price range, ATP is really good for that. The other thing ATP is good for has to do with the types of threats. So one of the things that's going on here is there are new threats coming out all the time. Zero-day exploits, all sorts of stuff. So basically, the hackers, the malware guys, whoever they happen to be out there, they're coming up with new stuff much faster than the security companies can keep up with, right? Because it takes time for something to get loose in the wild, for it to be detected, for it to be figured out, et cetera, et cetera. So with ATP, you end up with a situation here where you've got another layer that you can add into your protection. So we've got a little animation here. This is just showing, you've got your IDP, you've got your anti-malware, but we've got something new here called sandboxing. So that's what ATP does. The new thing is sandboxing. So what sandboxing does is when it sees something new that it hasn't seen before, it takes that information and it uploads it to the cloud. So there's a cloud database of all the other ATP users. So if someone else encounters this before you, they'll have uploaded it to the cloud, and then when you see it, we'll be able to sync up with that cloud and say, hey, wait a minute, we've seen that before. We know whether that's a threat or not. So we use cloud machine learning, again, sharing all this information with anything new or weird that you're seeing coming in and approaching your network, sending it up into the cloud, and letting it run in basically a virtual network in the cloud where we can watch and see what's going on. So that way, we're always on top, even for new unknown threats. It's just walking through the steps. We see something new. We send it up to the cloud. The cloud identifies it, provides feedback, updates the cloud database so it doesn't have to do that again. And this just keeps going on in real time amongst all of our ATP users. So the database grows quickly and provides much faster ability to be able to respond to threats than traditional security services. So when it comes to the ATP products, we've got an ATP 200, an ATP 500, ATP 800. Primary difference is just the firewall throughput. So generally, when you're trying to choose a security appliance, whether it's an ATP or a part of our other series, the main two things you're looking at is how fast is that WAN connection, what security services are they going to use, how many users are they going to have. And based on that, you can then match up the specs with our different firewall appliances to choose which is the proper level for you. And of course, you can always call into us and we can help figure that out for you. So this is just showing here the new ATP series provides all of the same sort of UTM type functionality that you find normally, adds that new sandboxing functionality, and includes the managed AP functionality, the high availability pro, and it works with our Secu Reporter and Secu Manager software solutions. So you can see here I'm looking across. Like I said, this is an old presentation because PowerPoint for some reason crashes with the new one. With different levels here, the ATP 200, 500, and 800. You can see if you're just looking at pure firewall throughput, the ATP 200 can get up to 2 gigs throughput through that firewall. But what you really want to look at is when you start providing the UTM functionality, the local antivirus and IDP, you see that drops throughput a lot. So it drops down to about 450. And then on top of that, you just need the overhead of knowing that, that's in an ideal world where packets are perfectly sized and you're using the best protocols. So realistically, you'll get even less than that. So if your customer has, a faster than a 300 meg WAN connection and you want to provide all those security solutions, you probably want to go up to the 500, et cetera. So if you've got a gig connection, you'd want to go up to the ATP 800. So we'll move on from security. And we'll start talking about switches. So Warren has a question. I see his question come in. I'm going to go ahead and answer his question really quick before we move on. And he was asking, what happens when something is sandboxed? So that's a good question. This is not my area of expertise, but I believe we've got the ability for you to define what you want to do. So if something gets sandboxed, do you want to block it until it gets categorized and we figure out it's safe? I think you can set it to do that, or you can set to allow it until we find out whether it's good or bad or not. So I believe that that's fully up to you. I believe it's similar to how we do our content filtering. So if you hit a website that hasn't yet been categorized, you as the admin have the ability to decide whether to let that through or whether to block it until you're sure it's safe. Pretty sure that's the same thing on the ATP. Anyway, on to switches. So we've got lots and lots of switches, and I'm not going to spend a bunch of time going through these. Instead, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to talk about our naming conventions. So you can tell a lot about our switches just by looking at the model number. So the first thing you're going to see on that model number is it starts with some letters. If it starts with ES, that tells you it's a fast Ethernet switch. If it starts with GS, it tells you it's a gigabit switch. If it starts with XGS, that tells you it's a gigabit switch with 10 gig uplinks. If the switch starts with XS, it tells you that it is a pure 10 gig switch, so all ports are 10 gig. We've also got our NSW line. Those are our dedicated cloud management switches. I'm not going to really talk about them right this second. So anyways, so looking at those numbers or the letters that start with tell you what type of switch it is. The next thing you're going to look at is the numbers. So we then have model numbers. So if it starts with a 1100 or 10,000, that tells you it's an unmanaged switch. So it is plug and play and it does its thing. When we get up to the 1200 series and higher, that's telling you that it's got a web-based interface. So for instance, if you see a switch that's a GS1005, that tells you that it's a gigabit switch and it's unmanaged. If you see a GS1200-8, that tells you that it's a gigabit switch that's got a very basic web management. So the difference between the 1200 series, the 1900 series, and the 1920 series is some of the advanced features you'll find. All of these are web managed switches, so all management is done through a web-based interface. The 1200 series is a really basic model with some basic functionality, basic VLAN, some other stuff like that. That's designed for a small office. Going up to the 1900 gives you some more flexibility and more functionality. And then once you get up to the 1920 series and the 1930 series, they're essentially a full layer 2 managed switch, just no command line interface, everything through the web. So that's sort of the model numbers. And then after you see those numbers, the other numbers you see there will be telling you how many ports it has. So if you see, you know, a GS1920-28, that tells you that there's 28 total ports. So it's a 24-port switch with 4 uplink ports. And then after that, you will see might see a letter. So if you see P, it tells you that it is a standard PoE switch. If you see HP, it tells you that it provides 802.3 AT PoE plus power. So again, so when you're looking through the price list and trying to figure out what switch, just try to remember those rules, and you can pretty quickly figure out what is what. Above the 1920 series, we have the 2210 series. So these are our true layer 2 managed switches. They still have a web interface, but they also have that command line interface. So if you're one of those old school guys that prefers to do it that way, or if you like to do a lot of scripting, this is the way to go. We have heavily mirrored sort of the Cisco command line. So if you're familiar with the Cisco command line, most of that is going to carry over when using one of our 2210 series switches or higher. And then when we get up to the 3700 and the 4600 series, those are our layer 3 switches. So essentially routers in a switch box. I want to talk just a little bit about PoE. So most of the devices these days, almost all of our switches models, except for a few legacy models, all provide PoE+. So that's up to 30 watts of power per port. So the next thing you want to look at here is the PoE budget. So we've got switches all the way down at 60 watts power budget, and we can jump all the way up to a full 1,000 watts of PoE power if we need to. We've also got another cool feature, which is smart management of the power mode. So we're able to intelligently monitor the PoE device itself and see how much power it's actually using. The standard way of doing PoE is the device itself classifies itself into one of 4 classes that says I need at least this much power. And unfortunately, those classes have some pretty big jumps. Class 3 requires 15.4 watts of power. Class 4 requires 30 watts of power. So what happens if you have a device that needs 17 watts of power? Well, unfortunately, on a lot of switches that are out there, it'll reserve that full 30 watts of power for each device instead of just 17. So with our solution, and we're using an example here, our WAC 6502D-S, which requires a peak power of 16 watts, is we're able to monitor and see what's going on with that PoE device, both its continual draw and its initial draw that it requires for boot up. And we're able to see, hey, wait a minute, this device only needs 16 watts of power. And so because it only needs 16 watts of power, we'll only reserve that much for each of them. So you end up in a situation where you can put a lot more devices onto that PoE switch without having to up the PoE power budget of the switch itself. So you can almost, in this example, you could almost double the number of access points you could fit on a switch with only a 340 watt or 375 watt PoE budget. Okay, moving on. We are in the process of transitioning from the GS1920 series to the GS1920 V2 series. So we still have plenty of the 1920s out there if that's what you're used to, but eventually we'll be transitioning everybody to the V2 series. So some of the big changes, we've changed the look of the device. We've added a new 8-port PoE Plus model that's fanless. So if you're looking for 8 ports, high output power, good power budget, no fan, that's the way to go. And the other big change we've made is the 1920 series can be Nebula managed. So you can use it your traditional way and manage it with a web interface. You could use our software, our Zone software, to manage it, or you can stick it up in the cloud, and it gains all the same functionality that the NSW series switches have when it comes to Nebula management. Just going through, the other nice thing about this is this has been one of the complaints on the Nebula switches is people wanting 48-port versions, and we'd only had a 24-port version. So we've now got a 48-port cloud-managed switch that you can use in the 1920s. We've also on these devices added some new LEDs. So we've got a series of LEDs there. It's number one, well, between number 1 and number 3 on the little graphic there, which lets you see visually quickly how much of your PoE budget is currently in use. We've also added an LED to let you know if the device is being cloud managed and whether it's connected to the cloud or not at that time. And we've added a button that will let you roll back to the last custom firmware or configuration. So you can save a configuration if you're going through and changing things and realize you've messed stuff up. You can hit that button and it'll switch back to the previous functioning config for you. I kind of mangled that, didn't I? And just some other stuff here. This follows a big thing that we're really big on, which is designing our hardware to last a really long time. If you've attended any of our previous wireless presentations, we've hit over this, and we're using that same philosophy in our switches. So we've put extra protection on the ports themselves to be able to handle electrostatic discharge without damaging anything on the board. We've increased our surge protection on these new 1920 V2s. We are using entirely solid-state capacitors. There are no more saline-based capacitors in any of these switches, so there's nothing that can leak or boil over. And we've really built up the quality of the power supply to make sure that power supply lasts and lasts. All of these switches come with a lifetime warranty from us. So that's it for switches. We'll now talk a little bit about our Wi-Fi products. Let's go through here. We've got a lot of different models. Unfortunately, the naming system isn't as consistent as it is with the switches. Short version of it is the NAP series can only be managed in the cloud. Our NWA 1100 and 1300 series, these are standalone devices, or they can be managed with Nebula. Everything 5,000 and higher can be managed either standalone or using a controller, whether it's a dedicated wireless LAN controller or using the wireless LAN controller that's built in now on our firewall products and our hospitality gateways. And then certain models at the moment can also be cloud managed. So some models, specifically our Wave 2 access points, those can also be cloud managed now. And by this summer, the plan is for basically every model to be cloud managed as an option. So we're slowly working on that. Warren just sent in a question here asking about, is there a spreadsheet or resource that gives these models features? So the answer is yes. We can give you copies of this presentation, but if you reach out to your sales guys, we've actually got some really nice comparison matrices which list all of the models and have the key features and which ones are in which. It's pretty easy to use, so your sales guy can provide that to you. It may also be available for download if you log into the VAR partners section of the website, assuming you are one of our partners. But if not, just reach out to sales and they'll be able to provide that for you. Sorry, so back on these models. The 6500 series, for the most part, have, or 6300 series and higher, have smart antennas built in. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We've also got this 5300 series, which is our access point specifically designed for hospitality. So if you're doing hospitality installs, the biggest trend we're seeing right now is the movement from what we call umbrella coverage, where you'd stick an access point up in the hallway and it would provide coverage to 4 or 6 rooms, you know, depending on the construction, to a new way of doing it where essentially you're putting one access point in each guest room, or in some cases every other guest room. So these access points are designed to mount onto a wall plate, but they can also still be mounted on a wall or ceiling. They've also got a mounting bracket that makes them really hard to steal or remove from the room, and can also allow you to mount these hidden behind a piece of furniture or underneath a desk where they can't be seen. They provide PoE pass-through, so they're powered by PoE and they can provide additional PoE to additional devices, and they have 4 ports on the bottoms that can then be run to either provide guest access with a wired connection, can be run to an IPTV set-top box, or it can be run to an IP-based phone in the room. So we're really seeing these catch off. We have versions of both with and without smart antenna. Moving on from here, maybe. There we go. So similar to our switches, we're really big on building our access points to last. If you grab one of our access points and you pick up anything with, I don't care whether it's Ubiquiti or it's a Ruckus or Aruba, you will be able to feel the difference in how we construct our devices. So generally our access points have a ton of vent holes in the back, and we'll have a giant metal heat sink behind the PCBA. This is done to draw the heat off the board and get it out of the access point. Some of our competition doesn't have any vent holes at all. So when you're dealing with solid state materials like that, that is the #1 cause of failure over time, is heat fatigue, whether on the individual components or on the solder joints themselves. So by concentrating and focusing on drawing heat off the board and components and venting it, it helps the hardware last a long time. We literally have people calling us up wanting to replace access points they bought 10 years ago that are still functioning, but it's just too slow at this point as far as the Wi-Fi standards go. Just like on our switches, all of our capacitors are solid state, so they'll last and last and last. That's probably the second most common cause of failure on a solid state device like this, is the capacitor leaking or boiling over. So we've eliminated that. And then we've spent a lot of time optimizing the RF experience. We provide a lot more shielding on the board itself to help reduce the signal to noise ratio. We do not mount our antennas directly on the board. We mount them on their own isolated board that provides an extra level of isolation. So that gives you, when you add it all together, it gives you anywhere from a 2 to 3 dB benefit when it comes to the signal to noise ratio. So what you see when you compare us to a lot of our competition is in a nice clean environment, they basically perform about the same. But when you've got users that are on that far edge of being able to get their signal back to the access point, or you're in a really crowded environment with a lot of other RF noise, this additional engineering, a little extra cost we put into the board gets you, is the difference basically between a slow but reliable connection and an unusable connection at those edge cases. Enough about that. So Nebula Flex is a term we talked about on the switches. This is something we're also using on some of our access points. This is what we use to designate devices that can either be used the traditional standalone method, or you can put and manage through the cloud. It's something that's super easy to do. Basically, by default, you log in and it will give you the option, do you want to use this locally or do you want to manage it in the cloud? If you decide to manage it in the cloud, you simply go to nebula.zyxel.com, log in, add the device to your cloud, and it will automatically detect that change and reboot into cloud mode. And you can always switch back, so you're not locked into one or the other. So when we're talking our Nebula Flex APs, again, I apologize, this is an old slide. It's our 1100 series, our 1300 series, and now our NWA 5123 ACHD and the WAC 6303D-S. And then again, hopefully by this summer, all models should be able to be Nebula Flex. So let's talk a little bit about smart antenna technology. If you're a Ruckus reseller or you're familiar with Ruckus, you're probably familiar with smart antenna, otherwise you're not. It's only us and Ruckus that provide this smart antenna technology. So the main benefit from how we've done our smart antenna implementation is we've optimized it to deal with crowded RF environments. So crowded because there's a lot of users in a small space, crowded because there's lots of access points around. Really annoying, you know, if you've set up your customer, they're in an office building, you can control, you know, and plan out your channel usage and your AP placement, and then somebody in the office next door puts in a bunch of stuff that causes interference. Things like that is where smart antenna really shines. It also shines in just tough environments such as like hotels where they've got concrete walls and you can't put an access point in every room. So you need something with just optimal sensitivity to be able to pick up that weak signal that comes out of the guest's iPad or iPhone trying to connect to the Wi-Fi. So basically, smart antenna helps solve all of those issues. So a traditional antenna generally comes in two flavors: an omnidirectional antenna, which is your traditional, you know, round ceiling mount access point, provides kind of a dome or umbrella shaped coverage area, or a directional antenna, which provides sort of a dedicated beam of coverage. So what smart antenna does is it uses an intelligent algorithm that allows it to go through literally hundreds or thousands of different antenna configurations based on where the client is or where there are other sources of RF interference. It does this for each client device, and it even does this on mobile devices. So a lot of people go, well, Wave 2 APs now have beamforming, isn't it the same thing? Beamforming really relies on the user being stationary, and it takes time while it adjusts the beam till it optimizes it. Smart antenna does it much faster and is able to work with those moving clients in your situation. So it makes a huge amount of difference in these tough RF environments. So a couple years ago, the University of Brescia in Italy, their networking group got together and did an analysis trying to see, you know, is smart antenna hype from Zyxel and Ruckus, or does it really make a difference? So they put together a paper. If you go to that link that you see on the screen there, that'll take you to their actual full report. If you go to our website, or you just search Zyxel and smart antenna or Zyxel and co-channel interference, it'll take you to a landing page where we summarize the key things from the report. We've got white papers there and other documents you can download and provide to your end users or your customers to help explain smart antenna benefits to them. But anyway, the short version of it was they took our WAC 6503D-S with smart antenna, and they took the Ruckus R700 with smart antenna. They took Cisco's 2702, and they took an Aruba AP225 and compared them. So Zyxel and Ruckus smart antenna, Aruba and Cisco no smart antenna. So the first thing they did is they tested them in a clean room environment. And so this is what I'm talking about, where you're talking about, tweaking and getting the max performance for some of those edge cases. So what they found is, sure enough, smart antenna had the benefit. So depending on which test you're looking at, basically Ruckus and Zyxel were neck and neck for #1 and #2. Very marginal differences. Some cases we were #1, some cases Ruckus was #1. Cisco was always a pretty solid #3, and Aruba was #4. The next thing they did, which is really interesting and different than a lot of testing you see done out there, is they recreated a real-world environment where you've got lots of other access points out there or other sources of RF interference, whether it's Bluetooth or smart home devices, ZigBee. All of those are using that same 2.4 and 5 gigahertz spectrum. So they re-simulated that, and some interesting things happened. So as I was talking about, we've optimized our smart antenna to pay attention both to where the client device is and where other sources of RF interference are, and optimize the antenna pattern based on both. So the Ruckus R700, just based on the real-world testing, doesn't really focus on other sources of RF noise and just optimizes the pattern based on where the client device is. Now, maybe Ruckus has changed it since then. Maybe the new R710s and some of the newer models have fixed this. But the R700, when we did this test, really didn't. So when you put it into a real-world environment, suddenly Cisco became the #2 guy, and Ruckus in just about every test fell back to #3. So what happens is Cisco doesn't use smart antenna, but they've got some other technologies they use that helps deal with co-channel interference. So what happens is Zyxel had the least amount of degradation in this noisy environment. Cisco had the second least amount of degradation, and then Ruckus and Aruba fell back by the wayside because they didn't have anything to deal with co-channel interference. So in a real-world environment, especially one that's really tough and noisy, smart antenna makes a lot of difference. So we've got a number of different access points that have smart antenna functionality. We've got our hospitality access points, those square ones you see on there that are cheap. We've got that pass-through, they've got smart antenna, and then we've got a number of other devices here, our NAP 303, our WAC 6303, our 6502D-S, and 6503D-S. So these all have smart antenna. So a number of different solutions based on the application and your budget. Going on from there, I won't spend a lot of time on this. We've got 2 dedicated wireless LAN controllers you can buy for handling up to 64 devices or handling up to 1,000 devices for access points. These can be used locally on the premise, or you can mount these in your data center and have them connect over a secure connection to the customer location. No VPN required. It can do NAT traversal. Although we're seeing, a lot of people are moving to cloud-based management instead of controller-based, or they're looking for a single box solution. So again, our USG, our UAG series, our new ATP series, all of them provide management of our 5000 series and higher access points with almost all the same functionality as the dedicated wireless LAN controllers. So you only need the dedicated controller if you need to manage more devices than our one-box solution provides the ability to do, or because you need a few of those really odd features that most people don't need. So that's the quick takeaway on that. Now let's move into Nebula. So Nebula, and specifically these days, when I say Nebula, I mean our Nebula Cloud Control Center, or MCC. This is like our alternative to Meraki. So if you're familiar with Meraki or you're familiar with AeroHive, it's the same sort of model, the same sort of takeaway for you. We've got the Nebula Control Center, which is our cloud managed portion. We've got our dedicated NAP series access points, our dedicated NSW series switches. We now have our Nebula Flex models in both access points and switches, and then we've got our dedicated NSG cloud-managed gateway devices. We've also got our Nebula mobile app. So some of the cool things we can do here is set up without unboxing. We've got a QR code on the device itself, and we've got the same QR code on the outside of the box. So basically all you need to do is take your mobile phone out, launch our app, point it at the box, scan that QR code, and then you will assign it to your customer. And if they have multiple sites, to the site that this device is going to, and then you can ship it to them. That's all you need to do to set them up, so you don't have to do anything on site yourself. Once you get the device on site itself, it simply needs to be plugged in. Plug it in, make sure it's got power, make sure it's got an internet connection with DHCP, and there will be nothing else you need to do on that device. It will automatically reach out to the cloud. It will see which customer, which site it's supposed to be at. It will update its firmware, and it will download the configuration. So you can send people out on site who don't have much computer knowledge. They can do it. If you've already ran the wires for your customer premise, you can ship them the device and have somebody on site there just plug it in. So it saves you money in that aspect. And then the configuration itself is super simple. We've got a standard web-based interface that's been optimized to make things simple and easy to set up. You can go through the whole process in less than 5 minutes, from creating the account to plugging something in to getting it actively working. Once you've done all of that, you can manage and monitor your customer from anywhere you've got access to your mobile app or to a web browser. And we have optimized this interface for managing multiple customers and multiple sites under those customers. So zero-touch provisioning, built-in multi-site, multi-customer management. It's a unified interface for access points, switches, and the NSG series gateways. We've got all sorts of fun functionality there. This is just showing you an overview. You can see your customers based on a Google Maps. You can drag and drop them to get a physical idea of where they are. And then we've got a snapshot of the site health underneath that. You drill into your customer, you get the site, you drill into the site, and you've got this dashboard here. And we've actually modified it since this screenshot was taken. If you're just doing access points, we've got a dedicated access point landing page now. Or if you're doing everything, you've got that, where it shows you everything that's going on in the network in a quick, easy to see view. And then you can drill down further into that. So some of the takeaways here for you when it comes to Nebula is simple 3-step installation. Plug it in, register the device to the customer in the cloud, and do your configuration. And you can do these steps in any order you want. So before you even order the hardware, you can create your customer's site in the cloud and start working on the configuration. And then once you get the hardware, you can scan it and plug it in. So you just have to do these 3 steps in any order you want. The other thing, and this is a big thing that sets us apart from Meraki other than cost, the basic Nebula functionality is free. So if you're familiar with Meraki, you know you have to buy that annual license every year. And if that license expires, you lose the ability to do any configuration and monitoring of that customer site. The hardware works, but you can't change anything until you pay them money. And if you've been selling Meraki for a while, you also probably know that they like to negotiate on the initial bid, but aren't necessarily always that flexible when it comes to negotiating pricing on the renewal, since you've already deployed the hardware and it's kind of stuck there. So Nebula offers a free version out of the box for lifetime. It provides you that zero-touch auto deployment. It provides you access with the app. It provides you the automatic firmware updates or features. It provides you the ability to configure all of those devices, all for free. Unlimited number of customers, unlimited number of devices. There's no cap. There's no 100 device cap or anything like that, like some of our competition. It's free. So on top of the free version, then we also have what we call the professional pack, which unlocks some additional features and functionality. So this is where your license comes in. To give you a reference point for the license, One access point for 1 year is around $35 a year. You know, it compares to Meraki, which is, I think, $200, although it goes on sale for maybe like $150, a little bit less than that. So huge savings in the annual licenses. And then we also do something else that I think no one else offers, which is we provide a perpetual ProPack license. So if you know you want that ProPack functionality, but you don't want to have to renew it or manage that every year, you can buy a single purchase perpetual license that lasts forever. And it is tied to the customer site or organization. It is not tied to the individual piece of hardware. So if you buy 10 AP licenses perpetually and then down the road you decide you want to tear out the 11 AC access points that are there and put in some 802.11ax access points, you can do that without having to buy any new licenses. So anyway, what are the differences between the professional pack and the free version? The biggest difference here is going to be logging. We store a year's worth of logs in the cloud. You don't get that on the free version. We have the ability to automatically generate email reports, and you can brand these email reports, so you can set them up to go to your customer and include your logo and stuff in there. So that emailed reports is something that's part of ProPack. We've got a cool feature that allows you to, or that automatically generates a site topology map showing all of your network resources and what's plugged into what. So that is something that comes with the ProPack. ProPack gives you more admin accounts. Let's see, what's some of the other cool stuff? Okay, so another one of the really cool features here is when you have the ProPack, you've got a lot of customers, a lot of sites. It allows you to clone organizations or clone individual sites. So if you're setting up a new one, you can find somebody that's 90% of the same configuration and simply clone that to the new site or the new org, and then just change the few things that need to be changed. It also gives you the ability to use templates, so you can make the same change across multiple sites with a single click, essentially, instead of having to change each site one by one. So those are some of the main features. If you're doing IPTV stuff, we've got some really cool new IPTV reports. We've got some really cool security gateway reports, which require the ProPack. But for a lot of you and for a lot of your customers, the free version is probably more than enough. So we give you that flexibility. Free cloud out of the box. Some of the devices will include 1 to 3 years of ProPack in the box, or you can add it yourself. Everything works through co-termination. So everything at that customer, no matter how many sites they have, all of those sites expire at the same time. So you don't have to worry about managing, each site individually, or if you've added devices at different times, having to, have those expire at different times. So we do that automatically by default. If you are here today, you are probably part of our partner program already. So just a reminder, it's vars.zyxel.com. You can log in and get access to some resources, recorded webinars. If you've forgotten who your salesperson is and you need to contact them, you can do it all through there. And that concludes today's webinar. So that's it as far as what I've got. So if you've got questions, send them in through the Q&A window there in Zoom. If there is something you saw here and you said, oh, wait a minute, we didn't know about that, or oh, that sounds interesting, reach out to your salesperson. We can do a one-on-one training. We can set up a dedicated webinar just to talk about that, whatever it is you need to do. If you've got techs that you want to get better technically educated on the products, we can set those up with our channel sales engineer so we can train you or train your techs. If you're looking for more salesy training, we can do that for you. And just in general, if there's types of webinars you'd like us to do, we want to do more webinars. We want to be doing, multiple webinars every week covering different topics. So email me. Let me know what it is you'd like more of, what would be beneficial to you, any ideas, thoughts you have, marketing materials you need from us, cross-reference sheets, all of that type of stuff. Email me, let me know what you're looking for, or reach out to your salesperson, which is probably either Sandy, Jacob, or Ivan. Let them know, and we'll try to make it happen for you. So again, use the Q&A window if you have any questions. I'm not seeing anything new coming in. So Andy is asking about the recording URL. So for that, I believe we automatically post that to our website. should just be able to look for, I think it's just search for Zyxel and then recorded webinars or something like that. There's also should be a link on that VARS page. If you log into there, it should link you directly over to the recorded webinars. Or your salesperson can provide those for you. Hector, let's see what we've got here. We're always talking about comparing products, baselines such as Sonic Wall and Meraki. Switching to a different brand is always risky, absolutely. What would be your top 3 reasons to start promoting and using Zyxel? Okay. Top 3 reasons that we've got for you. First up, I'm just going to propose, if you've got additional, you're using stuff, use this as an alternative. We should be coming across significantly cheaper, especially when you compare us to guys like Meraki and whatnot. So, quote the customer. Customer wants it. Say, here's what Meraki gets you. Here's what the Zyxel does. Look at all this money you can save. Do you want to stick with who you know, or do you want to save some money? That's a good way of doing the transition for you. As to why us, I'd say one big reason would be we're small. We aren't Meraki. We aren't HP. We care about our customers. You've got easy access to us here at our offices. So, when you're going into a bid situation, chances are you're the only guy that's going to be quoting Zyxel as an option for them. So you can provide that to them. When you call into us, you're dealing with the same person each time. If you need customized support, we can provide that to you through our support team that's located here in-house. So I think that goes a long way for us. If you're part of our partner program, we should be giving you good margin. We've got the deal registration, so if you register deals with us, you get additional discounts for us. So you should be able to make margin even on our cheaper stuff, which competes with Ubiquity. You should still be able to have some okay margin on those products and much better margin on the higher end stuff. So that's something we can do there for you. I think those are some good reasons there for you as far as going with us and why. I hope that answers your questions. If you have anything specifically you want to bring up, just send it in as another Q&A and I'll try to address it. Warren was asking, I believe this was during our switch part of the presentation, 3 years from now we'll be able to get replacement fans. And the answer to that is absolutely. We keep stuff around and keep spare parts around for 5 years after the product has been end of lifed. And I think on all of our new switches, I think they're using standard size fans. So I think you can always use a third-party fan that's got the same form factor, and we can always tell you what the measurements are for those. So Warren is asking about tools we're ordering so we can get everything at one time. So log into that VARS site. I think we've got the materials posted up there. If not, reach out to your salesperson. I know I spend ridiculous amounts of time working on new materials, cross-reference sheets, single-page sales kits, end-user promotional materials, all sorts of stuff. So it is there. So if you're not seeing it on the vars.zyxel.com, reach out to your salesperson. Let them know what you're looking for. And they should be able to provide all that for you. If you want copies of slides you've seen in our webinars, we can provide that for you. So there's lots of materials there. It's just finding it and getting it to you. And honestly, the easiest way to do that is to just call or email your sales guy, say, hey, this is what I'm looking for, and make them do the effort of putting that all together and sending it over to you as a single package. That would be my advice. Let's see, anything else? Bob doesn't have a question. He's just commenting that our tech support is great. So that's another thing. If you've joined today's webinar, chances are you are already a VAR. Be sure you are calling in using the VAR support line. That will get you bumped to the front of the queue for talking to someone. And then the second thing, and this is true with any company, or even if you're calling to cancel your cable or having issues, with your Netflix subscription, always ask to speak to someone in Tier 2 support. We have Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. And while I would love to say all of our tiers are excellent, certainly we strive for that, sometimes you get a Tier 1 guy who's new and he's just not understanding what you're asking him, or he's still got an imperfect knowledge of the product itself. So if you're not getting where you want to go, ask to talk to Tier 2 or reach out to your salesperson and tell them, hey, I need better support than I'm getting, and we will make that happen for you. Something else we are doing right now is we are providing after-hours tech support. That is being handled by an outsourced third-party call center. So if you're calling before or after our local support is available, you may be getting an outsourced tech support. So if that's a problem and you need better quality support, but you're not available during our normal support hours for the local guys, we can set that up for you to have somebody call you at the date and time that's convenient for you. So if you're going to be on site at that customer location Saturday, you know, at 3 in the afternoon, let us know a couple days in advance, and we will have somebody call you at that time when you are on site, or provide you a number that you can call if you run into issues on those weird hours. That is one of our local Tier 2 or Tier 3 support guys. So that is available for you. Just reach out to your salesperson and make that arrangement for you. So Daniel is asking a good question here. What is the range on APs in regard to ceiling height? I have industrial customers that have 40-foot ceiling heights. So in general, higher is better. Higher isn't a negative necessarily if you're looking for maximum coverage. I'm going to say this when it comes to coverage and throughput is it's hard to give a hard estimate as to what's going on, you know, what the range is. One of the biggest factors we run into isn't the access point itself. It's either the client device or the RF environment itself. So for the client device, you know, these access points are putting out 1 watt or more of power. It's a tremendous amount of power. We can send this signal, and you can still pick it up. If we stick it up on our roof over a mile or 2 miles away, you can still see that signal. The problem is the signal can't get back from your little iPhone back to the access point where the access point can do anything with it. So that's normally where the limiting factor is getting that signal back to the access point, or it's an interference situation. The RF environment, even on 5 gigahertz these days, is so crowded that you have lots of issues with noise floor and that signal to noise ratio. So that's where smart antenna comes in, and that's where some of those extra little tweaks we do when it comes to the RF shielding and not mounting the antennas directly on the PCBA gives you that little extra difference. That'll be all the difference between a slow but usable connection and no connection when looking at our competition. We are planning on doing a dedicated wireless webinar where we can talk more about the things that affect signal and stuff like that, on what those factors are. But if you're in a tough environment, look at the smart antenna technology stuff. It makes a huge difference, especially if you're doing, you know, something like the 40-foot ceiling in a expo center or something like that, where the signals from the access points can go really far and you've got lots of users all talking over each other. It makes a world of difference on the coverage. Yeah, so that'll be my answer to that. Yeah, people are asking for the recording URL. I cannot provide that for you, but again, it should be posted to that VARS URL, or just reach out to your salesperson, or just Google it. It should be posted within about 48 hours normally. Bob is asking for the partner support number, and the answer to that is I don't know it off the top of my head, and I can't easily look it up at the moment in the conference room here. I think it's on the VARS website, but if not, just reach out to your salesperson. They'll provide that number to you. Warren was also asking for that, so I'm just going to dismiss that. Again, any other questions, send it in through the Q&A window. I am not seeing anything more popping up, though. Yeah, most switch work is always done after hours. After hours is usually the only time you would even consider swapping out equipment. So absolutely. So yeah, just again, if you know you're going to be doing that, set that up with us a few days in advance so we can have somebody available for you. That's tier 2 or higher that can help you out if you run into any snags. Absolutely. Is there a survey tool you recommend for the access points? We've got a free tool you can use called Zyxel Wireless Optimizer, or ZWO. It's a very basic site planning tool, but it's good enough to rough out a general location of how you're going to set stuff up. There are other more expensive options out there that do, the planning where you can, put in the wall types and the materials and then try to estimate things. There's no particular one I recommend. Generally, though, you just got to go out there and do a site survey. If you're trying to provide really top-tier coverage, there's a lot of guys out there that don't even bother with site surveys anymore, especially if they're deploying the smart antenna stuff, because the smart antenna is so flexible when it comes to dealing with tough network stuff that it handles it well. The one thing I'm going to tell you, though, no matter what tool you're using, is you don't really need to plan for the access point. You need to plan for the client devices. Again, an access point, most business access points are at least 1 watt power. Most of ours are at least. But your iPhone is literally less than 60 watts of power. So there's a huge mismatch between the client device and the access point. So the client device is going to be the #1 thing that limits your coverage, and then co-channel interference between the devices themselves. So those could be the access points, those can be other RF devices that are located in the area. Those are the 2 big limiting factors, and most planning tools aren't going to plan for that properly. So one thing I tend to recommend is if you're using one of those planning tools, plan the access points and drop the power down on those. Drop the power to 25% or lower, so it more accurately recommends the 2-way communication reach between the client device. That seems to help really, really well when planning things out, is to drop the power. Even if you end up deploying them at full power, when you're planning based on reduced output power of the AP does a much better job of estimating the real world coverage patterns you're going to see. Okay, that seems to be it for questions. I will hang around here for a few more minutes in case someone's busy typing something away, but you can always email me, Shawn R, S-H-A-W-N-R, @zyxel.com.